or should I say, welcome to the DFS early bird. That's my best EMAC impersonation. Dan Strafford, Chris Randone. I mean, he's done enough times to meet Chris where he does the away we go. So I figure I have to give it back to EMAC every once in a while. But Eric McPherson, he took the night off. I'm here with Chris for this three-game NBA slate. We'll talk about each game by game. But Chris, how the hell are you doing?
What's up, man? You kind of threw me a curveball right there. I wasn't even... You got me kind of awakened right now. So yeah, three games NBA. I mean, filling in for good old pal EMAC, but obviously always a pleasure to work with you, man. So yeah, I'm excited, man. Not the best of 3-game slates, but we'll figure out what we're going to be doing here.
Yeah, as we record late on Sunday night, we do not yet have a line on the Milwaukee-Denver game. That is the last game we're going to cover on this podcast. We'll go game by game just to keep it simple and take a look throughout each. But hopefully maybe a line comes in when all games are over for the night. We get one before we head on out. But don't forget, we're brought to you in part by SuperDraft. SuperDraft is the future of DFS. They are getting rid of salaries and giving you the multiplier. So someone like James Harden's going to be 1x, and then maybe somebody down the road a little bit, a Jeff Teague might be 1.83x, or you really have to check it out to understand it. If you want to, use the promo code AWESEMO, gets you $20 on your first $100 deposit. Also, growing prize pools over there, and I hope to see the same heading into baseball season, which is now, I believe, just weeks away. It's just weeks away now.
Cannot wait.
Big fan of baseball, so looking forward to that rolling around for the DFS and for season-long purposes. And also don't forget, early bird is your promo code, 50% off your 1 week of any premium plus package over at awesemo.com. So quickly looking at this one, Chris, Charlotte and Atlanta, seeing this out as a 225. In fact, both games that have lines right now are at 225, both this and the Toronto-Utah games. Before we start recording, and I agree that Chris, you said this could be a somewhat ugly slate. I think it may be full-on ugly when all is said and done, but we will talk through it, try to get down to the bottom of each of these contests. Rattle off here. John Collins is probable heading into this contest. Actually, yeah, he's probable with a bruised right thigh. Keep an eye on that one. You have Clint Capella still out. Kevin Huerter is probable. Hunter, I believe, is in fact questionable with a bruised left knee. So a couple of bruises going around this Atlanta team. Blake Monk remains out with that suspension. Cam Reddish is out, I believe, for Atlanta. I know he's out on the weekend. He was out for Saturday's game. Don't have an official word on Monday, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Bembry is considered questionable for Monday's game against Charlotte with an abdomen issue. So it looks like pretty much everyone who plays the 3 or the 4 for Atlanta has some sort of issue here, and we'll take that into consideration. But taking a look at Trae Young, Terry Rozier, and Devontae Graham on the other side, we can sort of roll through whatever way you see fit here. How do you see this matchup at 225 over under? Not an incredible pace game per se. Atlanta has a higher pace team, but what are your initial thoughts looking at this first look of Atlanta and Charlotte?
I'm interested to see where the field goes with Trae Young. With Giannis out, obviously he's the highest priced player on this slate. And being in a short slate, it's like, I get it. It's Trae Young, and obviously the upside's there. But I will say this: he's 3 of 28 his last 4 games from 3-point range. Really has had some come to earth games over the last 2 as well. Just really hasn't played well. I know that he was sick. I know that he had an illness, so we can take that into consideration. But I am curious to see kind of where the field goes with Trae Young and how high owned he is. I will say this though: I think I don't mind fading him in this spot. I really don't. I think a more balanced approach and taking out Trae Young is somewhat contrarian, but I think it also is an effective way to really separate yourself on a 3-game slate. I think typically when we see a 3-game slate, we got to try to figure out how we're going to differentiate and really be unique in a sense to some aspect. And I think fade and Trae Young can definitely be that. So I don't mind that. But I do like John Collins from the Atlanta side. The front court of Charlotte just really has no good front court defense. And typically what we've seen is bigs really destroy and take advantage of that front court. So John Collins is definitely someone on my radar. He is $9K on DraftKings. So, I mean, it is a little pricey, but considering this is a 3-game slate, I don't mind it. Charlotte side of the ball, I think we can really agree that Rozier's in play, Graham. Obviously, these guys are somewhat decently priced enough on this 3-game slate to allow us to have exposure to them. And I mean, there is upside for the both of them. Huter, he is probable as well. Sorry, I was just making sure. But I like Huter. I think Huter's probably the third option for me on this Hawks team. But I got to tell you, man, I mean, you got the slowest the slowest paced team in the league against the fourth fastest. So how does this game kind of go? I don't know. But when I look at everyone else, Bridges, Washington, I'm okay with. And then obviously as you get cheaper, I guess Cody Zeller is going to be in consideration. And maybe even like a Dwayne Dedmon, who has been getting run lately. You're going to get 20 minutes. But over the last, I think it's 3 of the last 4 games, he's gotten over 20 points. And in one of those, he did get 30 DK points. So he is 4,100. And I would consider him as far as like a filler in this game. But outside of that, man, I'm not really seeing too much else from either side of this game.
Yeah, I'll say that it does feel as though DraftKings, and this is where we jump off here at the DFS early bird, just for a consistency standpoint, has priced people down, or at least sort of put a lid on some of these prices on a 3-game slate. I will point out, as Chris did, pace is clearly a question mark here. Atlanta gets a major pace down game. Charlotte gets the major pace up. Which one wins out here would be something to consider. Also point out points in the paint, as Chris was saying. Atlanta, 29th in the league, points in the paint. Charlotte, 23rd in the league. So these forwards, the Zellers of the world, you talked about PJ Washington, Dedmon, all of these guys are going to be mix and match options, depending on where your price points come in and exactly how. Because 3-game slate, short games, we know that we're going to have a lot of overlap, a lot of high ownership. Trae Young, I think you made a great point there. Where does he land in projected ownership, which we have over at Osmo.com? Is he 50% plus with Giannis out? Is he even 65, 70% plus at 10-3 when you have these cheaper front court options in this game and other games? Will be very intriguing to see how we can differentiate. And there's always an opportunity. Just because it's a 3-game slate doesn't mean that everyone's going to have the same lineup. There are ways to get around it and figure out exactly where the upside is. But I think you broke it down pretty well. I'll say PJ Washington was somebody I thought about immediately in this one against Atlanta. He's at 5,600. Cody Zeller makes sense. And then you do have the Atlanta quote-unquote bigs, the likes of Dwayne Dedmon and so on. So you have a lot of flexibility here with this game beyond Trae Young. Rozier's just 66, Graham 64. Jeff Teague also carrying a Q tag. I didn't see that before. He's considered questionable Monday's game against Charlotte due to an illness. So again, it's that time of year where obviously teams are tanking, teams are sort of packing it in, but also it's flu season. We've all been reading about coronavirus and COVID-19. Like there's a lot going on in the National Basketball Association.
Can we just talk about that just for 1 second because you brought it up?
I don't know if we should, but go ahead.
Okay. All right, never mind. We'll go ahead and bypass that. I was
a different podcast for a different time, I think. I'm happy to discuss at any point, but I think there's a lot going on here just to keep track of. So if Teague's out, obviously that gives Young maybe a bump in minutes. It gives a Herter, if he's healthy, a bump, and just things to keep track of. Things we'll keep track of over at Osmo.com as we roll forward. Things to consider on even a short slate on where minutes may get meted out on this slate. Looking at Toronto and Utah, Fred VanVleet, I believe, is still out. He was out Sunday with a shoulder issue. Don't have an official word on Monday as of yet. So that's one to keep an eye on, clearly. And I don't think anyone else worthwhile is no. So everybody else is clean bill of health heading into this one. And looking quickly here just to make sure. Yeah, Gasol's healthy and playing. So yeah, Pascal Siakam at 8,700. Lowry's 84. Gobert's 79 on the other side. On paper, Chris, this feels like a game that if this was a 10-game slate, we'd all ignore, like in entirety. This is a pace down. It's one that doesn't have a ton of necessary upside as you look through it. Toronto's 14th in pace, and then Utah, a little bit different than years past, but they're still 25th on the season in pace. Both teams are pretty good defensively. Utah not as good as they've been in the past. Does anyone stand out in this one? Maybe looking for a diamond in the rough, somebody that you think has some upside, a Norman Powell, maybe who's been playing more minutes, or even an Ibaka or a Conley on the cheaper side. Anybody that you think has a good matchup here and can be exploited?
Yeah, this game, I like because there's definitely a lot more fantasy viable options. Both these defense, you mentioned the Jazz defense. I mean, they haven't been the same Utah Jazz defense as we saw earlier in the year. And the defense for Toronto has not been as great either. Defensive efficiency has gone way down. And we've seen kind of teams who are not so strong really just put up offensive numbers against them lately. So this game, I think, will definitely be competitive. But there are a lot of fantasy options here. Siakam, Lowry, Gobert, Mitchell, and Van Fleet will obviously be somewhat interesting, but you would have to think that he's going to have a minutes limit. And so if you want to risk paying $6,500 for maybe 20, 25 minutes, it definitely might be contrarian because I don't think the field will go there. But then you can also get OG for $6,200 and Bogdanovich for $61 and Ibaka for $59. But you mentioned Gasol's healthy. He is playing tonight. Don't know how he's doing right now against the Kings, but I know he definitely got in there in the second quarter. So Toronto's back to almost full health, essentially, especially if Van Fleet's back. And obviously usage changes somewhat, but 3-game slate and with no Giannis here, I mean, with these guys priced appropriately, you can fit in a lot of these guys. And I think where my priority will lie will probably be Donovan Mitchell. And I think Bogdanovich at 6,100 is really nice. But if you want to get somewhat interesting, I think Clarkson at 4,200 for the Jazz, I think would definitely be in play. I think now with Toronto coming back to full health, Hollis Jefferson's out the door. Boucher is out the door. I don't even think I would want to go to Gasol yet in this spot. But outside of that, I think any one of these guys from this game is definitely in play. And obviously, we'll see tomorrow kind of where we are at with ownership-wise. But I could see this game really garnering a lot of ownership, considering there's guys in here that can definitely go off.
Let's taking a look. We're at halftime of this Raptors-Kings game. It's 51-50. Siakam's played 18 minutes. OG Anunoby has played 17. Ibaka 18. Lowry 16. Norman Powell at 21 minutes. Now, again, Van Vliet out for this one. Hollis Jefferson 6 minutes. Patrick McCaw with 9. Marc Gasol 10 minutes, 0 points, 1 assist, 1 rebound, 0 of 3 from the field, 0 of 2 from long distance. So about where you'd expect a lot of these minutes to shake out. Chris Boucher not in the game as of yet, would assume getting no minutes in the first half. Probably won't see him in the second half either if this game remains close. Toronto 44-18 on the year. Sacramento 28-35, but has been a tough out for a lot of teams throughout the season. So that's one to track, see exactly where these minutes come down. It is a back-to-back, so that is something to consider for the Gasols of the world just coming back from injury. He's an old man. He still has some minutes left in him, but do they sit him on a back-to-back? Do they limit his minutes greater to where an Ibaka or even a Pascal Siakam gets more run to start this game simply because Gasol is out will be intriguing. Also, Rondae Hollis Jefferson could get some more run if Gasol didn't play. All conjecture here from me. Utah, I think you're right. Donovan Mitchell at 7,500 still has enough upside to do it. He just hasn't done it a ton this year, Chris. Like there hasn't been this really consistent Donovan Mitchell offensive explosion on the year. We've seen some games here or there. I think it was a couple of games back against Phoenix, he had a strong outing. Then he paired it with a Boston outing, but still not really doing it for that $72, $75, $8,100 price point on a regular basis. I do think there's some upside here, but I might stay away myself at shooting guard and look to a Powell for $700 cheaper if Van Vliet remains out. And if Van Vliet's back in, then maybe Terry Rozier or even getting down to a DiVincenzo, who we're going to talk about in the next game with Giannis out. But something to talk about throughout the day on Monday. We'll have an NBA strategy show over on YouTube. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, hit the alarm bell so you know we're coming at you each and every day with live programming over on YouTube. And if you're listening on iTunes or on Stitcher, leave a comment, leave a rating. It does help us go up the charts on all the different podcast apps and make sure everybody's hearing our content, which we do appreciate. So keep that in mind as you're listening throughout the podcasting network from awesemo.com. Any final thoughts on this one? Anybody you feel like needs a second call out or somebody we may have missed, or ready to close it out with the Milwaukee-Denver game?
No, I mean, Van Fleet obviously has great defense, and since he's been out, the shooting guard position has really kind of taken advantage of them. I mean, we've seen that in the last few games with Damian Lee, Booker, Devontae Graham. I mean, all putting up pretty decent fantasy numbers. And so I think you made a good point about Mitchell, though. He's been very inconsistent, but at least his price allows us to take that risk compared to, let's say, like a Trae Young, which obviously we know Trae Young has more than enough upside and the potential to get there. But knowing kind of the price point, the 3,000 difference between the two, I'm okay with Mitchell. I mean, obviously, I think he will garner ownership. I mean, there's just no doubt on a 3-game slate. But it's like you said, he does have the upside, and I think you just have to take that risk given that he's only 7,500.
All right, let's continue on here. We'll close out the pod with some final talk about Milwaukee and Denver. Obviously, this game is going to be colored heavily by Giannis Antetokounmpo being out. He has a knee sprain, was the last exact diagnosis I saw. Let me read through here. Missed final 2 games due to a minor joint capsule sprain in his left knee. Take that for what it's worth. But he is out for this game against Denver. And that gives us an opportunity to talk about some of these other pieces for Milwaukee. I do want to pull up their game from Sunday just to make sure we're looking at minutes and some potential. Again, a back-to-back here for the Bucks. Let's see what we got here. Pull that up. But Chris, as we look through, anytime Giannis is out, Chris Middleton becomes somebody that I'm at least going to try to fit into my lineup. I get that he's going to be highly owned. I get that there's not a ton of upside necessarily when he's going to be, especially on a 3-game slate. I think on Sunday he was owned at like 65%. I would assume here he's 85% owned in most fields. Like, is that too big a number, D? I feel like he's going to be all over the place simply because price point's not that crazy at 7,600. Decent matchup. What do you think of this game, and what do you think of Middleton's ownership?
I mean, you have to think, right? So much usage runs through Middleton when Giannis is off the court. I think I saw a stat earlier today, Dan, where it was like in the 1,300 possessions that Giannis has been absent, Middleton's had a usage of like 34%, a field goal percentage of like 50%, and an effective field goal percentage of 57%. But I think the biggest thing was his actual true shooting percentage was like over 60. So he's highly effective, highly efficient, and I just don't think that there's really any way you can fade him at 7,600 on DraftKings. I just think that regardless of the situation, you just have to lock him in. That's it. And no matter what, if he's 60, 70% owned, you still have 40% or 30% advantage over the field. Now, if you want to get cute, like I get it. And I could see that, if you're hoping for like an injury or if you're in foul trouble or he just has a completely off night. But I mean, I'm locking him in. It just doesn't really make sense to do anything else otherwise. But with that said, I think we also have seen Eric Bledsoe step up and have usage and really take more shots and be involved more in the offense in Giannis's absence. So I think Bledsoe is criminally priced at 5,700. I think that's another area that you should definitely go. And then the other guards, George Hill, DiVincenzo, they're cheaper guys as well. And they will have a little bit more role in the offense, but primarily on the second unit, but I'm okay with it. Outside of that, though, looking at anyone else from the Bucks, if you want to maybe do like a Marvin Williams at 5K, he's going to play 20 plus minutes, but not too much there else to offer. Brook Lopez, I think, is in play. I think he'll have to really go up against Jokic majority of the time, and I think he'll garner a couple more minutes. But I think everyone's going to see what happens with Ersan Ilyasova. Typically, he does get the starting nod in this, and ownership does go there. I don't know if I like him in this spot, but we'll see kind of where everyone's at with ownership tomorrow. But other than that, though, looking at the Denver side, I think everyone's in play, man. I mean, Jokic, Murray, Barton, even Millsap. All these guys, I think, should be priorities. If you're multi-entering, I think you should figure out kind of different roster constructions with all of them. And then if you're looking for cheap guys, Gary Harris, Jeremy Grant, I'm okay with them too. But outside of that, man, I think this game in Toronto, Utah are the priorities, and then Charlotte, Atlanta will be definitely secondary because there's just way better options. And I think these two games will definitely be competitive. Even without Giannis, I think this game can still be competitive.
Yeah, we don't have a line still, and I would agree with you that this game is going to be close. Actually, seeing two books have -2 for in favor of Denver at home, which isn't that shocking with Giannis off the court. So -2 would not be that surprising. Don't have an over under as of yet. To point out, Bucks on Sunday, Ursan played just 15 minutes, and he was about 35% owned on Sunday night slate.
Yeah.
Had 7 rebounds, no points. Did not attempt a field goal in those 15 minutes. So take that for what it's worth. Middleton went for 39 points. Eric Bledsoe, he pointed out, 28 points. I think DK got trapped a little bit here with the news coming out later in the day that Giannis was out for the remainder of these two games on the road trip with their price points on this Monday slate. Also, DK does typically keep prices down on shorter slates. So I think you're very astute here to point out Bledsoe at 5,700. If we're building a balanced lineup, it's not going to be that hard. You know, even if you fade a Trae Young here, even with his massive upside, building a lineup with a Bledsoe, a Middleton, and then trying to mix in a Norman Powell or John Collins, Jokic, an Ibaka, it's not going to be that difficult. So you're going to have to differentiate maybe with some upside plays at cheaper price points or going up to a Trae Young. To Chris's point, let's see what the ownership is really across these different players as we scroll through and try to understand. I did want to just reiterate what Chris said about Middleton. He goes from 25% usage to 32.8% usage when Giannis is off the floor. And that is a huge bump when you really think about it. And looking at fantasy points, DraftKings points for Middleton, 1.47, 1.42 for FanDuel. That is with Giannis off the floor. Bledsoe also jumps a great deal there at 1.53 and 1.52. Looking with Giannis on the floor, they're at 1.26, and Bledsoe's all the way up at 1.17 for DraftKings. So a huge bump for both of them. We know that ownership's going to matter a ton here, but on a 3-game slate, I would agree with Chris. Tough for me to see Middleton not in my lineups. And you use the phrase, if you want to get cute, I think that's the right phrase. If you want to really just go off the grid and assume Middleton pulls a hamstring, Middleton stubs his toe running out to the court and can't play, or if you say Middleton shoots 2 of 17 for one reason or another, the matchup, whatever you see something different, you fade him completely. I get it. I just don't see a way on a 3-game slate, even building multiple lineups that I'm getting away from Chris Middleton here, and Bledsoe's a close second behind him. If we look at our top price players, Chris, we go, let's say Kyle Lowry up. So we have Lowry, Siakam, Collins, Jokic, and Young. Who of those 5 would you feel most comfortable building your lineup around if you had to start with one of those 5?
I'd probably say I think Jokic is in a really good spot. I would probably say Jokic, and then second I would probably say Collins or Siakam. I really think that I'm just if Trae Young is that highly owned tomorrow, I'm definitely okay with opposing and going the fading route. But I will say that if he is low owned, which I don't really know how low owned you can get on a 3-game slate, right, then maybe I would want to buy into that. But I think Jokic is my guy here. I think he's the best option out of those guys.
Yeah, I think ownership is a huge play here, and I mean that between 65% Trae Young ownership and 35% Trae Young ownership is a huge deal on a 3-game slate. Don't know where he's going to end up. I don't really have a projection therein, but I think that is going to play a huge factor in how these roster constructions come out. We've come to the end here. Don't forget, you find Chris on Twitter at Chris Randone. Find Osmo_com. Find me at Dan Strafford tomorrow. You have the DFS early bird with, I believe it's EMAC and it is Joey, I believe, if I remember correctly.
I'm not sure actually on Mondays.
I think, Monday into Tuesday morning, that is the pairing. Then it's Tuesday into Wednesday is typically yourself and myself, if that works out scheduling wise. And then EMAC doesn't come back till the following week. So I think that's what we got. Let's talk. I would love to hear as we close it out. COVID-19, coronavirus. I am intrigued now.
Oh, man.
What do you got?
Well, no, I just wanted to get your input because I know you live up north. I'm supposed to fly to New York City on Tuesday for 24 hours for a meeting. And my question to you is knowing that the state of emergency has just taken place. And, now they've, kind of mentioned that any business or school with 50 plus employees is on a mandatory leave, paid leave. What would your thoughts be as far as, do you just reschedule or do you go there? Because it sounds as if that like things are starting to get a little bit more hectic, but obviously, as we know, the media and as we know, politics, things are done for a variety of reasons.
I would, so I think most people who listen to me on podcasts know that I lean a certain direction. Politics aside, I would say wash your hands, which I know most people do. Don't allow anyone to lick you or sneeze directly in your face. Well, I mean, if you're into that, dude, whatever you need to have happen. But I kid. I would say, listen, I was supposed to fly to Austin, Texas on Tuesday for South by Southwest EDU, and that was canceled. It was canceled because of, again, similar circumstances. There were about, I think, 5,000, 6,000 people were supposed to attend. And then obviously South by Southwest the following week is about 400,000 people, I think, end up going. No large crowds, trying to wash hands a lot. I continue to travel if it's in your best interest to travel to said meeting. If it's something you can reschedule or do virtually, I think that's worthwhile. I think it's the smarts of the time. If you don't need to risk it, don't risk it. But that's the way I live my life. If I don't need to risk something, I'm going to take the higher odds of survival rather than putting it more on the line. So that's where I come at it.
I mean, I get it. And the crazy thing is that because that the virus and these announcements have taken place, it's not even guaranteed that the meeting can actually happen now.
Right.
So it's
or that your flight will happen.
Or that the flight will happen. So it's like, why would I put myself in that position? So,
Zoom and Skype and, even FaceTime Apple should be making lots of money currently because they should be promoting the heck out of their technology to make it all worthwhile. But listen, I am not a doctor, nor do I try to play one on television. Wash your hands, stay away from large crowds.
Apple cider vinegar, man. That's my golden ticket.
Sure. I put it in the humidifiers to clean out the humidifiers from time to time.
Okay.
There you go. Up here in the north, we have steam heat and it gets bad, Chris. But nonetheless, I'm glad everyone got to tune in to the end of this podcast. Hope you all enjoy. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, Joey and Emac, and then you get me and Adam, me and Lofty as the week goes. Oh, sorry, me and Chris, me and Adam, and then me and Lofty on Friday as we roll it out. Tuesday is my eldest 10th birthday. She is 10 going on 17. So if I come on the podcast Wednesday morning complaining about her, you are all forewarned.
What are you going to get her?
Oh, she's really into the hydro flasks, the water bottles, like the like really. It's a thing now. She's a 4th going on 5th grader. She wants a hydro flask and she got some Nintendo Switch games. That's where we're at, Chris. Google it.
Well, I just did. Yep. There's one for $1,000 custom. Wow.
We're not getting that one. We're not getting that one. They're about like $40, $45.
Hydro flask, vacuum insulated. Wow. This is a thing now.
It's a thing.
This is interesting.
We'll talk more about that.
All right.
I have some stories for you. With that said, as always, we wish you the best of luck in all your DFS endeavors on Monday. 3-game slate. Don't forget. Can't even get through the end here. Don't forget, check out the NBA Strategy Show, the Deeper Dive, and of course, Live Before Lock. And then on Tuesday, we get back to our regularly scheduled programming. MLB is near as well. Some more content coming for you and everyone right here on the DFS Early Bird, presented by none other than Awesemo.com.